introduce the man who stood closer to him in times of crisis and in times of fun than anyone else, his brother, Robert Kennedy.
Robert Kennedy eulogized his brother, groping for a hold on his own future. It was expected that he would take up the torch. He was the heir to a growing legend. His brother had promised so much. Events had cheated him, had cheated those who had depended on him. It was inevitable that Bobby take his brother's place.
Chairman.
His mountain climb symbolized his plans for the future. In 1964, Bobby Kennedy was thinking about the vice presidency. He took a world tour, first to Germany.
President Kennedy clearly saw the qualities of citizenship that have made your city a password of freedom. He saw clearly the quality of strength.
Then to Japan. And Indonesia, then Rome, and Poland. Everywhere he reminded people of his brother. But Lyndon Johnson had no desire to have his administration sandwiched between Kennedys. He had other plans. When he refused Bobby a place on the ticket, Bobby ran for the Senate against Kenneth Keating of New York.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we all know what we're here for. And I want to announce at the outset that I will not be a candidate for the United States Senate from Massachusetts.
Teddy Kennedy was up for re-election that year. His plane crashed on a campaign tour. The pilot died. Kennedy broke his back and was near death. Some people talked of the Kennedy curse. With his wife's help, Ted waged his campaign from his hospital bed.
I'm confident that I'll be on my feet. I've been given these assurances by some of the most able and capable doctors that we could possibly have. And so I'd probably refer that question probably even more accurately to their opinions. Take their word for it.
You have no doubt yourself.
None.
When do you hope to take your seat?
Rose Kennedy campaigned for both of them, as did the other family members.
That I've never had before. To introduce my son on a platform. I can tell you, of course, a great deal about him. I used to spank him with the ruler. But he really has been a great joy, and he does work very, very hard.
I want to thank my mother for the kind introduction. That's what we've gotten down to this campaign after some of these polls came out that we were not doing too well. We took Mother. Yeah, I know. I'm going to tell them people. I was up in Syracuse and the county chairman in Syracuse had been opposed to my nomination, George Van Lingner. And then the, he's one of the great county chairmen. He just didn't happen to like me. But then he spent a day with Mother, and he wants to run her. Yeah, I know. Well, why don't you give your own speech? See, that's it. We don't... My brother and I never... The reason she's never introduced any of us before is because we never go on the same platform with her. We couldn't possibly compete with that.
Bobby won.
Political opponents
Teddy
are already
won.
saying that you only plan to use New York State as a stepping stone, that your real goal is still the White House. Do you expect that you will be back in the White House?
Well, I think there's somebody there. And in my judgment, I keep reading that, and I never see any statement by him that he's willing to move out. So I think he's going to be there quite some period of time.
Meanwhile, the war in Vietnam had become America's war.
To withdraw from our responsibilities would endanger free men and free women everywhere and would bring the hope for peace to an end. I don't believe that you want to do that. I believe in victory, the victory of love over hate, the victory of man's hopes over man's fears, the victory of freedom over tyranny. And I believe you believe in that too.
And I oppose the war in Vietnam because I love America. I speak out against it not in anger, but with anxiety and sorrow in my heart, and above all with a passionate desire to see our beloved country stand as the moral example of the world. I speak out against this war because I am disappointed with America. There can be no great disappointment where there is no great love.
I'm going to remain on as a United States Senator representing the state of New York, and I'm going to support the Democratic ticket in 1968 of President Johnson Hubert Humphrey.
Bobby, strongly opposed to the continuation of the war in Vietnam, was cautious about declaring his candidacy for president. He was also influenced by advisors who felt he should bide his time until 1972. The suffering in Vietnam was continually on his mind.
Having judged that the war in Vietnam was a mistake without precedent in our history,
Senator Gene McCarthy was bolder. He decided to challenge Johnson in the primaries, and many of Bobby's supporters rallied around him.
we cannot stop with that judgment, but we're called upon to search out the causes and the conditions that led us into it. And this may require us to make the hardest and the harshest judgments about our national assumptions, about the institutions that embody them, and about some of the leaders who have become the spokesmen for this cause.
Bobby isn't ready to announce his candidacy for the presidency yet, and he doesn't think anyone else should announce either. But you can be sure that Bobby will be in Chicago for the convention next year. He's the only delegate who's reserved 4 floors at the Conrad Hilton. And if he isn't nominated, he'll be the only father who will come home one night with 40,000 balloons.
For 20 years, first the French and then the United States had been predicting victory in Vietnam. In 1961 and in 1962, as well as 1966 and 1967, we have been told that the tide is turning. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. We can soon bring our troops home. Victory is near. The enemy is tiring. Once in 1962, I participated in such a prediction myself. But for 20 years, we have been wrong. The history of conflict among nations does not record another such lengthy and consistent chronicle of error as we have shown in Vietnam. It is time to discard so proven a fallacy and face the reality that a military victory is not in sight and that it will probably never come.
Are you advising him to run? Oh, I have conversations with him, but obviously these are personal matters.
Do you think he should run?
Kept between the members of the family. Come on, be careful of what you're saying to them.
In New Hampshire, McCarthy scored the incredible upset. The war had made Johnson far more vulnerable than almost anyone had imagined. In the midst of the McCarthy campaign, Bobby decided to run for the nomination.
I run for President of the United States, not because of the answers of the 1960s, or not because I was involved in government during that period of time, or pleased to be involved in government, but I run for President of the United States because I believe in the ideals of this generation of Americans, and I think we can do far better than we've done in the past.
I shall not seek, and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
We can make changes. We can deal with the violence, but we can also make changes so that everybody has an equal opportunity, no matter where they live.
Once in the race, Bobby began to gain on McCarthy. He had started late, but he was closing the gap and was headed for a Chicago convention and victory. His hat was in the ring, but like Jack 8 years earlier, he wouldn't put it on.
Let me fall down over my ears, and then you'd be embarrassed if you gave me a hat that was too big. Let me try it on in home.
They couldn't let you leave Fort Worth without providing you with some protection against the rain.
Try it on in front of the mirror, quietly. I'll meet you back. I'll meet you in Washington.
I'll put it on in the White House on Monday. If you'll come up there, you'll have a chance to see it there.
Kennedys don't cry.